Do you ever have a hard time deciding where you want to eat? Do you often make these decisions based on something as simple as just an appetizer? If so, you're in luck, because today I'm going to be discussing the different qualities between Olive Garden breadsticks and Red Lobster cheddar biscuits, and I'm going to try and figure out what makes them so good. As always, thanks for tuning in to The Feast Freaks with your host, Christian Barbian. First off, why do we even need appetizers? An article from Street Directory states, the main function of appetizers is to increase your hunger and prepare you for the main course. For Olive Garden and Red Lobster, their baked goods pair with the food nicely and serve as excellent appetizers. In fact, many people choose to go to both establishments just for the cheddar biscuits or the breadsticks. But today, I want to figure out exactly what makes them so great and why people love them so much. Of course, opinions on appetizers will always be subjective, and there will never be a quote-unquote winner between Olive Garden breadsticks and Red Lobster cheddar biscuits. But as I pondered the two options, I decided that I wanted to discover what the best qualities of each are. This led me to finding two people, each passionate about one of the appetizers. First, I asked my friend Max, due to his extreme love of cheddar biscuits. I wanted to ask some questions about why he adored them so much. My first guest on my podcast today is my good friend, Max Harrison. How are you today?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
Doing pretty well. Thanks for coming on to my show.
Thank you for having me.
Not a problem. So I hear you're a good fan of cheddar biscuits.
Yes, of course. They're very good. A1.
Okay. So, in general, what would you say makes a good appetizer?
There are many qualities that go into a good appetizer. I feel like something that gets you ready for your meal, but doesn't necessarily fill you up, so you can still enjoy your main course. And something that is good throughout the whole thing. Like, it doesn't go bad. Has a good shelf life almost.
And the cheddar biscuits do a good job?
Oh yeah, they do a very good job of this. Great.
So, what are some things specifically that you look for in an appetizer?
Something that goes well with the meal. You know, that fits kind of like that theme of whatever you're getting for your main course.
So, what would you say are some defining characteristics of cheddar biscuits?
I feel like they're crunchy outside, like the crust, and then the moist inner biscuit. It stays good throughout the whole thing. It doesn't really get soggy or anything like that.
So texture is an important quality.
Oh yeah, very big.
Okay. So, how many cheddar biscuits do you usually eat?
I usually eat 6 to 8. It also depends on how hungry I am, what I go there for. If it's just a small meal, then not that much. But in a normal dining situation, usually about 6 to 8.
And 6 to 8 cheddar biscuits is still quite a bit of cheddar biscuits.
Oh yeah, it's a lot, especially for me, because I'm not that big of a dude, so I can't really eat that much.
So would you say, eating so many cheddar biscuits, would you say that cheddar biscuits are an important part of your meal?
Oh yeah. You know, it's kind of hard to mess up the cheddar biscuits, so it doesn't really happen all that often. But if it were to happen, it would kind of because I feel like the appetizers kind of set the tone for the whole meal. So if they weren't good, it would kind of bring down the whole quality of the dining experience. And if they're really good, then it sets the bar high and gets you ready for your meal. So for sure it does.
Are the cheddar biscuits an important factor of you deciding where to eat for the night?
Oh yeah, for sure. Every place kind of has their token, so to speak. McDonald's has their French fries. Red Lobster has their cheddar biscuits. So definitely, if I'm craving the cheddar biscuits, I know where I'm going.
Okay. So overall, in your Red Lobster meal, do you prefer the food or the cheddar biscuits?
I mean, we always go there for the main course, but the cheddar biscuits definitely have a big deciding factor in that.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely, I'd actually say probably the cheddar biscuits make Red Lobster what it is.
Would you like to provide any final thoughts about the cheddar biscuits?
I feel like they're a very, like, good, well-rounded type of food. You know, like, they set the bar very well for the appetizer for the rest of the meal. But then, like, they're also just good for, like, snacks and stuff like that. So they're, like, very well-rounded.
So not just as an appetizer, but just as food.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Alrighty, well, thank you for being on my show.
Thank you for having me.
And next, we have a guest who loves Olive Garden breadsticks just as much as Max here loves cheddar biscuits. So stay tuned. My next guest on my podcast today is another good friend of mine, Colton Mcclellan. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, man. How are you doing?
Doing pretty well. Thanks for being on my show.
Of course, anytime, bro.
And for the benefit of the audience, we do have Olive Garden breadsticks present to make sure we give an accurate and fair review of the breadsticks as we talk about them and discuss them today. So, Colton, what would you say makes a good appetizer?
Something that I think makes a good appetizer is something that can pique your interest in food but not completely fill you up. Something that could potentially go with your main course and something that you can eat along with your main course throughout the meal. Whether it be right when you start, in between bites, or just at the end when you're still a little bit hungry.
So, what specifically do you look for in an appetizer?
Specifically for me, I'd say about what I just said is about what I look for in an appetizer. I want something that is salty, gets me hungry, helps me, you know, just prepare my palate and prepare myself for what good things may come from the meal.
Okay. So, what would you say are just some defining characteristics of Olive Garden breadsticks?
Well, when it comes to the Olive Garden breadsticks, I'd say some defining factors of it are how soft they are. How they're very good and they kind of melt in your mouth, especially with the garlic butter and the seasoning that they put over the breadstick whenever they bake it. I think that is something that is very defining of an Olive Garden breadstick, as well as their shelf life. You could have them at the beginning of the meal, they're fresh, they're just as good at the end of your meal, even if they're not quite as fresh as they were whenever you first got them.
Okay. So, how many breadsticks do you usually eat at a meal?
Well, typically at a meal, it truly depends on like what I'm going there for. Say if I'm going to Olive Garden for a salad, I may not eat as many, but if I'm going there for some pasta, you know that I'll be eating at least 4 to 8 of the breadsticks.
So the breadsticks are always a part of your meal, no matter what?
Always a part of my meal. But say if I eat a salad, I may only have 1 or 2 breadsticks.
So would you say the breadsticks are an important factor when you decide where to eat for the night?
When it comes to Olive Garden, yes. Something that is very, very important to me is the quality of the appetizers that you can get from a restaurant. Whether it be the Bloomin' Onion from Outback or even just the breadsticks from Olive Garden, you want something that can set the tone for an amazing meal.
Okay. So when compared to the actual entrees, do you prefer the breadsticks overall or the food overall?
Most definitely the breadsticks, for the sheer fact that you can't go wrong with them. And most entrees, especially when you haven't had them before, are hit or miss. But you know that every single time you go to Olive Garden, you'll get those warm, beautiful, flaky breadsticks.
Alrighty. And do you have any final thoughts you'd like to share before we wrap up?
At this time, no. But I will say Olive Garden breadsticks are my favorite thing in the world.
Alright. Well, thank you for being on my show today.
Of course, man. Anytime.
Alright. And thank you for your insight on all of our food-related topics today.
Always. Thank you for having me.
In addition to my interviews, I also looked for outside information pertaining to the subject. I found one poll from 2015 that had over 6,700 votes cast. In the end, Cheddar Biscuits prevailed with a 53% rating, while the Breadsticks only had 47%. In my own poll that I posted during the week, I only had about 106 votes cast, but strangely enough, Cheddar Biscuits only had 39%, and Breadsticks won with 61% of the votes. Overall, I don't believe that this is a debate that can be won by either side, and it's going to be purely up to speculation for the rest of our time here. But now we know what makes a good appetizer, and overall what makes a good food in general. I'd like to give a special thanks to my interviewees, Colton Mcclellan and Max Harrison. I'd also like to give a special thanks to Dig CC Mixter for the song in this podcast. I specifically used the song Dwarf Planet by the artist Gerdarnark. As always, thanks for tuning in to The Feast Freaks, and I'll see you next week.